Now, to introduce our speaker, we're joined by a special guest and longtime friend of Rotary, Bobby Bridge. She's a former judge who served as Associate Justice of the Washington Supreme Court, and after serving 10 years as a King County Superior Court judge, she was appointed to the Washington State Supreme Court by Governor Gary Locke in 1999, where she was elected in 2000 and again in 2002. Bobby, thanks so much for introducing our speaker today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. And I always appreciate coming to Rotary. It reminds me of Herb, of blessed memory. And it just reminds me of how good citizens get together and can impact our communities for the positive. So I know that Rotarians like to start on time and finish on time, however, and so I'm going to jump right into this very special guest. The City Attorney's Office plays a vital role in public safety and the criminal justice system in Seattle, as the city's prosecutor for misdemeanors, which make up approximately 80% of the crime that occurs in the city, though not as many of its headlines. When City Attorney Davison took office in January of 2022, she was faced with rebuilding the entire executive leadership team, hiring back a depleted criminal division, and addressing a backlog of nearly 5,000 criminal referrals that her predecessor had allowed to go unaddressed. Within the first few months, City Attorney Davison has already hired a full executive team of highly experienced prosecutors from both the federal and local levels, many of whom are known to you, and has filled nearly all of the vacancies in her department. Together with her team, she has taken bold action on public safety by announcing a new close-in-time filing standard to limit the growth of the case backlog. She'll explain that, but you can figure it out. In other words, not going to wait 3 years to file something. A high utilizer initiative to address our region's most prolific repeat offenders. That's certainly of interest to all of you because many of them are in the downtown area. And announced a plan forward to clear the backlog of those cases, that 5,000 cases, by the end of the year. Ann Davison is the city attorney, is the first female city attorney and the first mom to hold the highest legal office in Seattle city government. She graduated with a BA from Baylor and holds a JD, Juris Doctor, from Willamette University College of Law. Her career in public service began more than 30 years ago when she worked as a caseworker in the United States House of Representatives. Over the past 3 decades, Ann has been a champion for those without a voice or power. Most recently, prior to her becoming city attorney, Ann worked in private practice, focusing on areas of such diversity as civil litigation, immigration, sports, contracts, business transactions, employment, and intellectual property. Ann is really pleased to be here to undertake a conversation with Rotary about her plans for the future, the messages that you all are wanting to give most directly to her about how your daily lives have been impacted by the lack of response to our criminal justice issues that face this city. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Seattle City Attorney Ann Davison.
Thank you so much, Judge. I do really appreciate that very kind introduction. And I want to say thank you to all of you who are listening today from wherever you are located. Thank you for being participants in our civic life and being civically engaged. And I hope that you spread the word to others that you know who tend to not be involved at the local level, that really it is really of paramount importance that we all participate in our local governance of our daily lives, because it is the most impactful on our lives and how we go about our day and what our day entails as we go about. And as mentioned, I am a mom, and so that's what's catapulted me here today, is because of those conversations with my children. There is social modeling going on, whether there are conversations with adults or not. Children are processing what they see and what the world is and how it works as they observe around them. So it's important that we start to understand that that is our role. That's my a personal piece about me that I take into this role as a city attorney. It's important that what we are saying about our laws are that they matter, they mean something, they are the reflection of our values as a society, and they are the rules by which we've agreed to live in close proximity of one another. And that's why they are important to mean something, because it's how we engage with one another and treat each other, and that's what we've agreed to. Instead of having me on screen for most of the time, I'm going to start to go through some slides just to give you some information, an introduction in case you're not familiar with what the City Attorney's Office is tasked with doing. It had probably been mainly hidden in an office that most people did not understand what it did. But it's important that we unpack that and really understand what it can and can't do as far as what it is it has authority over and where we can make those positive impacts for public safety, as we talked about earlier in the introduction about it's impacting all of us on a daily level. All right, so we've shared the screen. Okay, and I'm going to move past this one because we do know that that's me. All right, so the City Attorney's Office is based upon our city charter, and what we have a civil division that handles the legal advice and all litigation that the city is involved in, whether it's a proactive litigation or it's a defense litigation case that comes in. We also have our misdemeanor criminal division that handles misdemeanor crime in the city. That does make up 80% of the crime happening in the city of Seattle, and it also handles the infractions that are involved with traffic. That's all housed in the criminal division here at the City Attorney's Office. We have more than 100 attorneys, and we have amazing support staff supporting those attorneys in their legal work, and that comprises over 200 people here at the City Attorney's Office, of which I'm really pleased to say that I got to meet and have dialogue with each of them. That was where I spent the bulk of my time in transition, was meeting every single person here at the City Attorney's Office. Many of them had been here for decades, long before I entered this role or public service in this capacity. So wanted to learn about the office, their work, and get their perspective of how things were going from the inside. The city attorney is a key public safety partner, and it really is important to understand that we have to be in partnership with the rest of the relay team, as I like to call it, which makes up the public safety circle. I liken it to a track relay team where you're passing off the baton, and we stand ready to get the Seattle Police Department referrals for misdemeanor crimes in the city of Seattle. And then it is our role to understand what has happened in that case and to take that into account and then make those recommendations to the courts. So misdemeanors include things like assault, theft, criminal trespass, DUI, domestic violence, which can most likely be intimate partner violence, but we are engaged in other things on that too. The office is committed also. It's important to know that we've established a working relationship with the King County Prosecutor's Office, with Dan Satterberg's office. To me, this is one of the most important pieces that was missing, is just to have a dialogue that is a weekly dialogue, understanding what is happening at their level, at the felony level of crime, and what is happening at the misdemeanor level. Without that communication, I don't think it would be possible for us to improve public safety. So it's really important. We have set that in action. I started that the first week. It was really important to make an impact on that. So that is an important piece as we've been building. As I said earlier, this civil division is where we handle lawsuits that the city is involved with. And in addition to providing legal advice to those who are elected to make policy decisions on behalf of the city, in these different areas of law that are listed here on our civil side. My new civil chief, Tom Kuffel, came in from the King County. He worked over there for over 20 years. So I'm very pleased that he came to be my civil chief. He started on April 1st. So that was the last member to join my executive leadership team. Prior to that, I had interim civil chief Jack Johnson, who had been in this role as civil chief under Mark Sidran for about 11 years. So he was the one who helped me in the early days, in the first 3 months. And then we brought on Tom Kuffel to be my permanent civil chief. When we go to the criminal division, as the introduction mentioned, we did inherit a criminal case backlog of nearly 5,000 referrals that had been sitting here waiting for a response from this office. This to me was one of the most important aspects we would have to struggle with and decide what to do, because the longer those cases sat there, it was obvious that the harder they would be to prosecute. In addition to that, if we just continue to add things to the back of that line, we would constantly be looking backwards about crime that had been committed sometimes over a year prior, and not taking care of the things that were the present day referrals. So these were our challenges here. Was the backlog. We had a community court agreement that were sending people with tens and tens of previous referrals. That was an issue. And we also had a reduced booking capacity in King County Jail. This slide is really important to understand what has been happening as far as what are the police referrals that we've been receiving. So when I talk about that public safety circle and we are waiting for the handoff of the baton, so to speak, from the Seattle Police, we cannot take action here in the criminal division until we get that referral and we see that there's actionable evidence that we can move on. And so this gives us a highlight of what the number of referrals have looked like historically. And so a key piece is, I will pause to say this, it's not on the slide, and I get to embarrass a staff member who is not on screen, so I'm going to take the permission to do so. I am creating a first of its kind data and transparency team. So the reason why you even are able to see this type of statistics is because I've brought in a person who is very well skilled to do this data analysis and find this type of information so that I can be a better decision maker. So to have this landscape and context of when we talk about referrals, we need to understand what is the numbers that are coming over. And you can see the decline with the pandemic and that we got less, and that it is on the increase, which is where we say we do need people to call the police so that the referral can be made, so that we then know what is happening in real time for people in Seattle. Here is also the growth of the backlog. And we can see that the blue is my predecessor. The green is since I came in office, January 1st. And so we have already started to slow that and cut back, reduce that backlog. By my close in time filing, we at the same time are able to reduce that backlog. Again, by just putting in basic measurements of things and understanding what is happening internally, we can actually improve on the processes and make sure, to me, frankly, this miscarriage of justice, which is this backlog, does not occur again, because it is not typical. The types of cases that were in the backlog, this gives you some numbers here to understand what we're talking about. Cases that have been on average waiting for 334 days. And again, that is not the response that we think a victim of a crime deserves, is to wait an average of 334 days. Some of them even became expired because the statute of limitations passed, so they're not even actionable anymore. So it's a very serious issue, and that's why it was one of the top things we had to make a decision about. This also is an important slide to give us context for our society within the city of Seattle historically, and so we can understand where we're headed. So this again is information that talks about the ADP is the average daily population at the King County Jail. What has been happening more recently was that we were not able to book on misdemeanor crimes, but for very few. We have made progress again with that partnership that I'm building with Seattle Police Department, with King County Jail, and with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office to really, again, create working, functioning relationships in all those directions, because it's together we will improve public safety. But this gives you an idea of what had been happening with the jail and the capacity and the numbers there. We're around 100 currently for Seattle misdemeanor in the King County Jail as far as in custody. As a review, just what we have done since I've been here, we have been busy, but I'm really thankful to be here and thankful that there's not been a piece of the work that I have not disliked it whatsoever. Every bit of it, I feel so thankful and privileged to be serving as city attorney, because it is the work that I have wanted to do, and instead of just talking about it. And so hopefully, excuse me, you can see I'm not one for sitting around and not doing things, being idle. I like it when it's hectic, and we're going to keep going. So we've done a lot since we've been here, since January 1st in the 4 months. We did create the High Utilizer Initiative, which we saw a disproportionate amount of individuals creating a large number of criminal case referrals. And to me, that has particular importance for 2 reasons. One, we were seeing repeat victims, which is really traumatic to hear about. And that might be on the retail side, but it even can be in other types of settings. But it's also important to understand that to me, those are individuals that have been crying out for help, and they've just been overlooked and ignored and allowed to continue in self-destructive behavior that is not helpful for their future, and certainly again is impacting public safety at the same time. So it really is beholden upon me and our office to change what we're doing in that way, to understand what we can do for that. We also, with the new close in time standard, are able to, on average, we're now 6 business days to make a decision on cases that are referred over, again, down from that 334. We made our plan to clear the criminal backlog by the end of the calendar year by making a very difficult prioritization decision with the types of cases in that backlog, where we sadly do have to decline a number of cases for what I had said earlier, but that is a one-time thing specific for the backlog only, so that we can use our prosecutorial resources to go through the remaining ones of the backlog and stay with our close in time filing goal for present day referrals. And also the community court piece, which has been in the news recently, which you may have read about on Monday, where the Seattle Municipal Court judges have agreed to my request to, again, with people meeting the criteria for the High Utilizer Initiative. The community court to me is a place that is really important, and it is intended to be a place where we have very early intervention with an individual who is starting to show criminal activity. But when we have people that have had in the 40s of referrals, that is not someone that is suited for that community court. That resource needs to be preserved for the people that is intended to service, and we are now going to be putting people meeting that criteria in the Seattle Municipal Court. Whoops, I pushed the wrong button. I'm doing my own remote, so I'm trying to see if I like it or not. We'll decide for next time. So here's just some information on our High Utilizer Initiative specifically, so people understand what it is we're talking about. It was 118 people responsible for over 2,400 misdemeanor referrals that we got from the Seattle Police Department, with the types of cases that involved and the location from which much of that activity was occurring. And you can see it is concentrated in the downtown area, and you can see that a large amount of it is theft, and so we do take that seriously. I do go on walkabouts, which you probably heard, which is one of my most favorite things to do, is to really hear and understand and see in real time from the perspective of people in Seattle what they're experiencing. And it is hearing about the increased violence while the retail theft is occurring is really the most alarming to hear from employees. That is not something they should be expected to have at their workplace. No one should. When we go to, again, our average time to file, this was the average per year, again, that my data person was able to pull out, so we can get a context of what had been happening here from the city attorney's office, and now what we are doing. We are, as I said, we've reduced it to on average around 5 to 6 business days for us to have a response. We will not always be perfect. I do acknowledge that that's going to not be able to be possible, but that is our goal, and we are meeting it now, and we are making sure we make internal changes so we never have that type of a backlog. It is not typical. I did bring in former U.S. Attorney Brian Moran to do an assessment of the criminal division, and to hear someone who's 30 years as a prosecutor, like, this is not typical to have had a nearly 5,000 criminal case backlog. It's important for the public to understand that. So this is a progress on that. Again, as we review the backlog, these are the types of cases that we've had to prioritize for review that will still be reviewed by us to determine whether or not they are still prosecutable. all crimes against persons, firearms and weapons violations, DUIs, and cases that do meet our high utilizer initiative. And we've had to, with heavy heart, I had to make a decision about what cases we would be just having to decline based upon, again, the numbers that are there. And that's so we can move forward focusing on present day referrals. As far as the community court piece, again, just reviewing what type of a model that is. That's been something for people to understand. It was an agreement that was entered into in 2019 with my predecessor, Department of Public Defenders and the Seattle Municipal Court. Community court this is its third iteration of it, so it has been around before. And I do think it is an important tool. We do need to have all types of tools available to us to meet the variety of needs that are here. But we requested formally to change that agreement that was there so that it is that release first model and a voluntary referral to services is not appropriate for people that have been engaged at a high level of repeat frequent criminal activity. And so to me, again, that is diluting the resources of that community court for the people it will best serve. And we need to, again, meaningfully intervene and disrupt that cycle of crime for people who have frequent repeat criminal activity. And in that high utilizer piece, the criteria we have determined for that is 12 referrals in the past 5 years and at least 1 in the past 8 months. And so to us, that is a way to see that someone is now in a cycle that involves human suffering for them and for others. And I take that very seriously and personally to make sure that I do what I can to disrupt that cycle for them as an individual and for our society, because we need to make sure more victims are not traumatized and we seek adequate help for those individuals. Okay. I think I did semi-good on time. We're trying to make sure that we keep your meeting rolling, and that's my slideshow so you can give a good introduction of the office. And so now we will head to questions.
You did a great job, Anne, and thank you very, very, very much. We have a ton of questions on the chat board. I'm trying to keep track of them all and kind of. I might have a couple of repeats in here. And first of all, on behalf of Seattle Rotary, we want to thank you very much for stepping up to the job, coming to this meeting today. Your job is a very emotionally charged job, and some of the questions that we have for you, there's no way to get around it. They're going to be emotionally charged questions. So please take them with that we all care very much about our legal system. And so these are just coming from the heart that we care about our city and such. And so please understand that as I go through all of these with you. So thank you again for taking on this job and stepping up to it and being here today. So I'm going to go to the first one. Recently, the city of Seattle settled with the Seattle Times regarding the missing text messages from several public officials without admitting guilt. What is the impact of not admitting guilt for the public?
Well, I think that's important to note that as my role here, I don't discuss things that are in regards with legal advice or anything that did come to a settlement terms, and I think that's a good finalized piece that we were able to settle, and it's important to me that I keep that where it needs to be, just because of the nature of how things unfolded.
Okay, that could also go under the classification of no comment. Okay, I understand. Okay, here's one. How do you anticipate your high utilizer initiative will reduce crime in the longer term? And what options do you explore before putting that proposal forward?
Okay, I think so. For the longer term, how that was the
in the longer term.
Okay, yes, right, because that is always the goal that we have to have at the forefront of our discussion, is so we understand where we're trying to head. And so, as I said prior, those individuals are engaged in a cycle of crime, and I do really think that we have to provide for them and for the public somewhat of a pause, because we had, for example, an individual that was repeatedly, sometimes multiple times a day, going into a retail place and shoplifting, but doing so with aggressiveness, with threats to employees, with sometimes bodily harm towards employees, and multiple times a day, right? And it's a sense of powerlessness for the people running the business, for the employees, when they're there at their job, and it's also, again, leaving someone to behave in a way that we all have agreed that that's not what we need to do towards one another. And so to allow that person to just continue, and us not stepping in, is not caring about that person either. So the long-term plan is really we have to get a pause. We have to start at most immediately. We need to make sure that that does not repeat itself more than it should. And then we need to use that time, that pause time, to understand what is it that we can set up for that individual, so that when there is no more in custody time, it's not just a return to what was prior. To me, that is that moment that we can actually harness. That's the opportunity to change not just the physical part of what's happening, but even just that person's own self-message, which is I can do something else in society, right? Like, because we all will just go back to what we know. That's just human nature. And so we're wanting to take that opportunity to help to change that for that individual. I do really want to go to that space. That's where I've always been headed. But this role is important to have so that we can get to that space.
Okay, good answer. This next one is the emotionally charged question that I'm sure you've heard a lot. A lot of people think about it. I don't know what the answer is, so I don't know how you can even answer this, but it's one that a lot of people are feeling. How will justice be served to those 2,000 criminals that assaulted, destroyed, and harmed if their cases are dropped?
Well, I do appreciate that it is emotionally charged, and it was very difficult, and it's why I didn't take that initial decision early on in being here. I needed to take really good stock as what is happening here. Why did it occur? Why did it get to that place? And really, is it something that would come back? And once I really could understand that it doesn't have to be that way, there really could be some internal changes that we could make that would impact that, and we would not have to see that again. It was important to know that the close in time we can respond to the criminal activity, to me, is really the key to changing the message about if you commit a crime, what happens. I mean, it isn't just basic common sense when you think about an action occurring and the response that follows it. The more elongated that time is, the more attenuated or the least connected those two things are, right? And so to close that time gap was really important to me, and to see that when the criminal activity is occurring and our response to that, to show that there is a connection between those two. So when you look at the backlog and you think about that, many in our high utilizar criteria will be also in that backlog. So those things will get brought back into current time. And if there's new referrals and there are some in the backlog, we will reach back. And that is what some of that reduction you've seen in the backlog. We are going back and taking those cases and bringing them and aggregating them with current referrals if they are happening again. Some of those, they have sat so long that there really was just going to be no way we could succeed. And we would have then used prosecutorial resources and the rest of the criminal justice system resources at something that really was unlikely to have an outcome with justice that was deserved for that victim. So it was a very difficult decision in creating that prioritization of it. But to look at what we have to do going forward, it really became clear we could not do both. We had to make a decision forward. And so that's how I got to that place.
So I'm not too bright, but what I'm hearing you say is if we're constantly focusing on backlog and old cases, we're not getting to the earlier cases where criminals have just performed a crime, where if we can prosecute those and work with those, we have a better chance at keeping them from reoccurring. And that's how justice is being served. Whereas if we're constantly chasing the tails of old crimes, we're not what's the answer? We're not serving justice. We're not turning justice around. That's the best way to serve the public and allow justice to be served.
And that message then is something will happen, right? It's
Yeah.
not the message is you do a criminal activity and nothing happens until 334 days later, right? That we're not going to see a positive impact to public safety and a crime reduction when the message is that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's another one. So the same thing with clearing the backlog. Do you prioritize by the type of offense, by the date of the offense, by?
We did by the type. Yeah. So that's what we reviewed back. So all crimes against persons, weapons, DUIs, within the high utilizer initiative, those are ones that we are going to still be reviewing that are in the backlog. So that's what we prioritized of things that we do think we have to review and see if they are prosecutable, review and see if we have a present day referral with that same individual, and then we can bring that together and bring all those charges at once. So it's not doing it more than once. We're going to be efficient in how we do it. So that's how we did it by types of cases.
I have a few bites on this next one here. That many of these high utilizers likely have accompanying mental health or substance abuse issues. Where is the increases in substance or mental health treatment services will accompany the high utilizers, since jail is definitely not the best long-term solution? Where are the increases there? Are you seeing those? Can you talk about those?
It is not the best long-term solution for sure. What we have to make sure we do is when there is any in custody time of any length, we need to be making sure we are setting someone better up for success when that length of time ends, regardless of how short it is. Otherwise, I think we have not done the best that we can do. And so I think that is a piece that we need to be making sure there are community service providers able to step into that space. I'm getting to know some of that, so I don't even know necessarily if there's the gamut that we need. My first piece is understanding these individuals and what are they needing, and we need community service partners to be there to provide that, because I do believe that's going to have many of that crossover of mental illness or addiction, or dual diagnosis of both of those. And I do spend time understanding from a psychiatrist kind of how that all plays together, and understanding it for me, so I can see what we have to do from our end, what we can control. And then we need to be having those partnerships, like I said, because it's not, we are just done. We need to know what's happening next. That's still part, I think, of what I feel is important for me to know and to make sure is there.
Another tough question, and thank you very much for giving us time to have these questions. Most of the time we don't get that at Seattle Rotary, and our Rotarians have some very good questions. So thank you for giving us this time.
Yeah.
This is a toughie. Question from Miss Davidson. The very nice, polite way they opened it. My perception is there's been an apathy within the SPD because their hard work on the streets has gone unresolved by your predecessor, resulting in a demoralized police force. What can your office, the city's leadership, and citizens at large do to revitalize that relationship?
Well, I disagree. It's not a difficult question, at least on the first part of it, because to me, it really starts with basics, and coming in here and really understanding that some of the basic things were just not functioning. And I certainly don't mean to trivialize it at all, but what I mean to say is some of it is very doable. It doesn't mean we can do all of it, but at least the basics we can do. And so I spend my time making sure that I show up in places, because to me, we all speak with what's important to us by making time for it. And my predecessor did not think that a partnership with Seattle Police was a part of public safety. At least that was my view. And I think it's important that they understand I'm here to do our role, again, as misdemeanor prosecutors for the city, and they need to do their role. So I show up at roll calls when there are shift changes. I do so even in the middle of the night, setting my alarm for 2:30 in the morning and showing up in the 3 to 4 a.m. hour at various locations to say thank you. I can go to sleep at night because I know if I needed to call 911, there's going to be somebody whose job it is to respond. It's important to me to do those things. I've gone on right along prior to being in office. I will do more. My criminal chief, I think, is even today at other roll calls at different precincts. This is where we just start to be humans again and say, you need to do your part, and we need to do our part. And this is how we improve public safety, is just by at least having conversations, because those weren't happening before. So when I say that, again, not to trivialize it, but it really does mean something. I've come to see that just showing up and being a real person with them and saying thank you has really done a lot. I did that one time at the East Precinct. I was there in the early morning hours to at a roll call, and a few hours later, around 7 or 8 in the morning, was out with a group of walkers in the downtown Seattle area, and we happened to be on 3rd, and they commented about how the police presence on 3rd was really appreciative of that. They were appreciative of that, and I looked in the car, and there was an officer I had just talked with a few hours earlier who had asked me a couple of questions in that setting when I was there. So I was able to say hello to him and introduce him to the group of walkers. And, you know, there it was. I had just talked with all these people, and all of a sudden it felt like Seattle was kind of a small town, and things felt doable, right? Because of us making time. And so again, you all making time here is a great step. And those are just the small things we can do, is to really understand that this is all of our collective issue is public safety. I can't fix it alone. I don't think anyone in elected office can fix it alone. It is going to be a practice that we do. It's never going to be a goal that we are completely there, but it's going to take all of us to do that. So for you as individuals, telling officers thank you is an important piece. I think that goes a long way. The basics do matter, and when they're not missing, it's evident. So
I'm going to give you 2 more so we can stay on time. You gave us a great presentation with a lot of statistics that showed a lot of trends. With all that we're hearing about the reductions in the Seattle Police Department force, what do you anticipate those reductions will do to your statistics going forward?
Well, it is concerning because, again, we can only act when there is that referral. And so if the officers can't go out to respond to their priority calls, then we are either sometimes going to not get a referral, or we may get an incomplete referral because they're having to get pulled away and aren't able to get back to finish that, and then we aren't able to take action. So it really is, again, each of us needs to function and do the role that we were intended to do in our society. And I shouldn't do theirs, and no one else should try to do mine, right? Like, it's important that we understand each person's function and the separation that's intended. Same thing with the courts, the separation of powers there between us. It's important that we all do our role and we do it completely. And so with them being understaffed, it will reflect upon we receive less referrals. But we hope that we will be able to support them and maybe flesh out some of those things that they aren't able to do because of their numbers, just in terms of evidence and making sure cases can be followed through. But it is an issue. It's definitely one.
It's a concern as we as citizens listening to this and listening to what we're learning from you today is probably going to be a significant reduction in referrals is what it's going to be. Because you're right. We got to do it right. We got to do it right.
We have to do it right. And we are seeing an increase, right? So that because they do know that we want them to send the referrals, whereas I don't think maybe before it was known that they were wanted to send referrals. We are saying we need to have them because we need to know what we can do from over here.
I got 1 minute left, so let me give you the last question, which is all near and dear to our heart. I don't even know if you can answer this one, but what is being done to reduce and clean up the graffiti all over Seattle? Is this a gang-related issue? Is this a bunch of angry people? What is going on in our city, and what can be done to reduce this, reverse this, fix this? Is this even part of your area? But we just all care so much, and it's horrible.
I am right there with you, and wholeheartedly is one of my top things to think about, because I do think even having a son as an artist who watches it all and tells me what looks like it's actually closer to art than not art, that's not what it's for. And to me, it does start to show a feeling of neglect, and it's that little edge of like, well, if that's there, well then does it matter if I do a little bit extra or if I do a little bit less? And we don't want any of us to kind of go to, I should just do a little bit less. We want to encourage all of us to do, well, yeah, a little bit of effort is important for me to do because we're all going to do a little bit of effort. That's just apart from my job. That's how I feel about it. So I do think there's things we can do. I don't know if it's gang related or why it is so massively here compared to other times. But it is apparent to me. I do know historically we used to have a graffiti prosecutor. We used to have a graffiti detective. I don't know the years of when those were. I just have heard that that was there. I'm not sure we can do something specifically like that, but I do know that it's an issue and it does start to erode quality of life just in visually. And again, I think it starts to invite other issues as well. So I don't have an answer for you, but I share your concern and do know that it doesn't mean that just because I don't have an answer today, it doesn't mean I'm not going to try to figure out what we can do, at least what I can help control to improve it.
You made that happen. It sure increased your popularity. I'm telling you. Hey, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much for stepping up to the job. We really appreciate your time. In recognition of you being here today, we have donated 600 servings of fresh produce to Harvest Against Hunger. It's one of our Rotary District 5030 projects. It's in your name. And you have donated 600 servings of fresh produce to help make this a little bit better world, which is along with what you're doing in your job. So thank you very, very much. I thank you again. Really enjoyed today. Great program. All right. I'd like to take a couple of minutes here to thank our sponsors. Also, Liz Powell, Remax on Market. Thank you so much for what you do. Bob Alexander, we've said it 100 times. We'll say it once more. Thank you, and thank you again for your sponsorship. Joe Farrell of Morgan Stanley. Thank you very much. Dominic Musafia, Seattle Divorce Options. Thank you, Dominic, for your support. Jacobson Jarvis, Certified Public Accountants. And of course, Matt Bretlin, Net Tech, for your pro bono IT services. We cannot do this without you. Thank you so very much.